your local SuperTalk Mississippi radio station, and you can watch us. We're on your computer, your mobile device. Just head on over to SuperTalk TV. Now, you're probably familiar with the Mississippi River, but I doubt you have traveled all 2,340 miles of it or across all 10 states. But our guest today, author Dean Klinkenberg, welcomes us on that adventure with his new book, The Wild Mississippi. Hey, Dean.
Hey, how you doing today?
I am doing well, and I'm excited to talk about a river I feel like we all at least have heard of, right? We learned it in school, and for us here in Mississippi, we feel like we may know a thing or two about it, but I'm going to guess you may know a few more fun facts about our great Mississippi River. So I'm curious, Dean, when did you first get intrigued about the great Mississippi?
For me, I really got hooked on the river when I was a college student. I moved from the Great Plains, from farm country, to La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is a beautiful river town on the upper Mississippi. And I lived within maybe a 10-mile or 10-minute bicycle ride of the river, and I used to take my bike down there and sit next to the river and, I don't know, brood or whatever. You know, I was kind of a moody college kid like a lot of us were at that age. That part of the river also has these amazing limestone bluffs that rise about 500 feet above the river, and I used to love hiking through there. So during those years, I really came to appreciate the beauty of the river and the sense of connectedness that I got from being near the river. But it was a few years after that before I really started writing about it.
What intrigued you in terms of writing about it? I understand maybe being more interested in learning about it, learning facts about it, or just getting to know the information about it, but writing about it in a way that would encourage others to maybe look at it in a different way, or look at it as an opportunity to vacation, or look at it as a tourist destination, which I don't think a lot of times people do with the Mississippi River.
Yeah, one of the things that got me going on this is I started writing travel guides for the Great River Road for people who were driving along the Mississippi as tourists. And I kept hearing these stories about people who would come to the river who were so excited to see the Mississippi, and they would drive from Chicago right after they got off their plane, and they would look at the river, they would feel satisfied that they'd seen the Mississippi, and then they would drive on. And I thought that was kind of silly, and I wanted to find ways to get materials in the hands of people that encourage them to spend more time once they got to the river. A lot of the things, one of the things I think about is mountains are majestic and they're beautiful, and it's easy for us to appreciate the beauty in that. The Mississippi, I think it takes more time, and it maybe takes a little bit of help from somebody to fully go deep and appreciate what you're looking at, whether it's the rich cultural history along the river or the wonders of the river's natural world.
You named it or titled your book The Wild Mississippi, which any of us here in Mississippi would be shaking their head. It's a great title. But how did you come across, or why did you land on that specific title for the Mississippi River?
I think part of it is I really just wanted to distinguish the fact that this book is about the natural world of the river itself, about the plants and animals, about the different kinds of habitats and ecosystems along the river. It's not about the Civil War. It's not about the great cultural history of the river. There's really not much about blues music or anything else that ties to the river's history. This is a book that just goes deep into the natural world of the Mississippi itself, and it seemed like The Wild Mississippi was one way to sort of convey that title, that sense.
So you say that, and it means something completely different. When I first read it, like The Wild Mississippi, anybody who has been on the river, ridden on the river, hunted on the river, or done anything, they go, "Oh yeah, it's wild, it's bumpy, it's a choppy sort of ride." So I was taking it in terms of like a wild ride down the Mississippi River, which I guess both could be correct.
Absolutely. One of the things that's interesting about the Mississippi is how different the perceptions are of the river as you travel along its length. So on the upper half of the river, there's very much a culture of recreation and camping and, spending a lot of time on the river. I think as you get further south, there's more of a sense of how dangerous the river can be and how, wild in the sense you're thinking of, how it's something almost to be feared at times. And I kind of hope in this book maybe cut through a little bit of that, even down for folks in Mississippi and the lower parts of the river, and begin to see the whole complexities and beauty in the whole system.
So as part of your research, Dean, for The Wild Mississippi, did you get to visit all the 10 states? Have you gone all 2,340 miles of the Mississippi River?
I have been all up and down the river multiple times. I've been I haven't had a chance to travel on the river the entire length. I've had some really nice canoe trips, and I spent 2 or 3 trips on the American Queen many years ago when it was running on the Mississippi. I've had a chance to be on large sections of it, but someday maybe I'll figure out a way to travel on the entire length of the river on the river. But yeah, I've seen much of it and much of it many times.
Did your research bring you to Mississippi to research the Mississippi River?
Absolutely. Like there's one of my favorite spots is Clarksdale. You know, you may be familiar with the Quapaw Canoe Company there, and John Resky and Mark River Peoples. I've been out on the river with them multiple times, and I had a chance to visit some of the public lands in different parts of Mississippi as well.
When you talk about the Wild Mississippi, or in your book, The Wild Mississippi, you want to encourage people to look at it as a destination. That's the Mississippi River. So you went through and found us places to go and sort of eat, stay, and play along the river. Would people be surprised at what they can find connected to the river?
I like to think so. One of the things that did surprise me, I've been, even before I started writing this book, I thought I was pretty familiar with the different places to get close to the river. And once I got out and really started purposely looking for public lands in particular, easy ways to access the river, I was surprised at how many opportunities there really are. And when I put the book together, I was trying to balance a few things. I wanted to pick places that were relatively easy to get to, so that you didn't have to have four-wheel drive to get to it, because most of us are not going to be equipped with a vehicle like that. And I wanted to pick places that kind of represented different aspects of the river's world, whether it was mostly cypress swamp or other kinds of wetlands or bluffs or floodplain forests. I wanted to do something that offered a mix like that. And Mississippi certainly has a good selection of all of that. And one of my favorite spots was St. Catherine Creek National Wildlife Refuge, which I thought was just a beautiful spot, and just within its boundaries had wetlands and floodplain forest and some cypress swamps. It's a gorgeous place.
You mentioned some cool fun facts that I don't think many of us may know about the Mississippi River. Dean, what are some of yours that you feel like people will be surprised to know about the river?
You know, one of the things I think people are often surprised about is that before we installed the navigation dams in the 1930s, how shallow parts of the upper Mississippi could get. There were places like around Winona and Wabasha, Minnesota, that part of the river where it's a pretty wide valley, about 5 miles or so. But at some times of the year, the water could be shallow enough where people could walk across without, getting their hair wet. That's one thing. I think, the other thing that still surprises me is that maybe we take this for granted, too, because of the levees that cut the river off from the floodplain, but just the immensity of the floodplain in your part of the river down in the Delta region. Up to 100 miles wide in places. At one time, that was 100 miles of floodplain forest and cypress swamps. I had no idea about that until I started really digging into the history of that area. I just knew that area, as farm country, so it was surprising to me to read about how much of that had been floodplain forest and cypress swamps before.
So folks listening to Good Things, Dean, how can they get The Wild Mississippi, your book? Would you consider it like a table read, or is it more of like a tourist guide? How would you classify The Wild Mississippi?
Whatever hook people want to use to be interested in buying it. I think it's a little bit of a reference. I'm thinking of it kind of like a city guide. If you bought a guidebook for Paris, it's going to tell you about the history of Paris and give you a sense of the neighborhoods, but it's not going to tell you about every single building in Paris. And this book is kind of like that. It's going to tell you about the different components of the Mississippi's world, wetlands, forests, etc. And it's going to tell you about some of the life, but it's not going to be the kind of book you would use if you really want to identify what kind of bird that is or what kind of plant that is. It might take 20 books to do that. So I think of it in that category. I think it's definitely a book you could take with you when you're at the river to help you understand more of what you're looking at. There are some sections that would be great, reading if you're just sitting around and you want to read some background on the river's history and the river's ecosystems. It releases on May 21, but it's available for pre-order now anywhere people buy books. You could go to your favorite local bookstore and pre-order a copy now or wait until May 21.
All right. Well, Dean, I appreciate your time. Best of luck with The Wild Mississippi, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I appreciate it.
All righty. You guys stick with this. We got more good for you coming up next.